Self-esteem never really made a lot of sense to me. All the modern advice about it, how to get it, how to change it, how to do whatever to it, for some reason never sat well with me. And I always considered myself having low self-esteem for pretty much all my life up until recent times. I think now I see it, and even the term self-esteem doesn't really make a lot of sense. It never really did, but now it's even worse in terms of what I went through. I went through a fair bit of healing process, and it then became a lot clearer. I remember most of my life, up until my mid to late 30s, when I started doing a lot of this healing, I would consider myself to have had a very low self-esteem. I wasn't really aware that it was a thing. There were times when I sort of knew that, I may have a low self-esteem, but I didn't really know what it was, or that things could be different, because you don't know anything other than yourself. You are always yourself. You can never be aware of anything outside of it. So I just thought that was me, right? I would walk around life feeling shame all the time, this sense of not being good enough, being broken, wanting to hide, wanting to be alone, wanting to be away, being scared to communicate and to be seen, to be heard. And it makes sense. It comes from a childhood where I wasn't really made to feel like it was okay to communicate my thoughts and feelings truthfully, so I had to hide. So I buried a lot of things, and it was expressing itself as a sense of shame in the stomach area. I wasn't aware of this at the time, but anyway, it was very painful, a life of hiding and constantly being in pain. But the other side of this is that it is incredibly motivating, and because you motivate yourself so you can be perfect, right? Because you feel so broken that the only way you're ever going to be happy is that if you do something perfectly, people will then love you and you won't have to experience your shame because you're perfect. And it makes no sense, right? Because it doesn't matter how perfect you are, it doesn't matter how many people love you, the shame comes from inside you, it's buried there. It's never going to go away until you heal it properly. There's no external gain that you can possibly make or change that's going to get rid of these things that's trapped in your body. So it makes no sense. But yeah, so I went through a lot trying to heal it after a while, because I didn't even know that's what I was doing. I just knew that I don't think I even really knew it was possible to heal, because it's just such a fundamental part of the way I functioned. It was a filter upon which the whole universe was filtered through. And we, of course, this is ego, right? But this filter, no matter what I did or what other people did or what I saw or felt or whatever it was, is filtered through this sense of shame and damaged and incompleteness that, of course, we all have to some degree. So eventually I started to do a lot of emotional work. This is within the last, I'd say 6, 7, 8 years. I really got stuck into deep emotional work, trying to feel, because it was a problem for me. And eventually I overcome a lot of my fear of experiencing emotions. The biggest one being grief. It was always very easy for me to be angry. I could never cry. Eventually I overcame the fear to a great extent of doing that, of crying. So I spent a lot of time crying for a period of time. But it didn't seem to affect the shame. But even before all these the recent healing times that I had, I was still trying to change myself with all the modern books, all the YouTube channels, all the blogs and the PDFs and the courses. And I've been to psychologists, psychiatrists. I tried all the antidepressants, all that stuff. Meditation, religion, Buddhism, all the cool stuff that everyone does, right? Power of now. And it all really says to do one of two things: to change your thoughts or to avoid them in some way, like to breathe or to be mindful, to try to be present. Or if you have a thought, change it to another thought. And it always just seems so ridiculous to me to stand in front of a mirror and tell yourself, look yourself in the eyes and tell yourself you love yourself 10 times every morning or whatever, you know, stuff that I have tried. And it just seemed so empty. It was like I had these thoughts that weren't real anyway. It felt real, right? Because I had the emotions attached to them. I felt broken, so I had broken thoughts. I am broken. Of course I think it's real, because that's how I feel. I changed the thoughts. I still feel broken. I just have weird thoughts on top of it that tell me tell myself I love myself, but it's just empty words because I feel a certain way. I do not see the point of this nonsense. What are we going to do? Think ourselves until we push down the feelings so far that the feelings disappear into some crevice of the body, and then we can finally be happy by thinking different thoughts and then suddenly these emotions will go away and we'll start to feel good emotions, and then we have this thing called self-esteem? Or do we just, like a computer, compartmentalize our shameful self, and then we create this other self through thoughts where we program ourselves to think a certain pattern, and then we only think in that pattern? I'm a good person, I'm this, I'm that. Looking at it now, it's insanity. It is a waste of time and energy. I don't know how it's helped anyone. A lot of people buy these books. These people who write these books are rich. And I don't understand how it's helped anyone. I can't see it happening. It never helped me for a second. The only thing it did was create the illusion of hope, where I was like, I'm finally fixed, and I got some good positive emotions, like such as hope and energy and stuff for a few days, but it always wore off. It was like a drug. And I did go through a stage where I was using self-help books like drugs. I would find a new one, it would make me feel good. It stopped making me feel good, so I need to find a new one to give me this hope. So eventually so that's the thing, is that even while I was doing it, after a while, it just started not making sense to me. People would say, the books or whatever it was would say, whatever it is about self-esteem, and I kept asking myself, what even is it? I don't understand. I can't find this thing that they call self-esteem, but I know that I have a poor self-esteem, except because of how I feel, right? I felt negative most of the time about myself and shameful and all that stuff. So yes, I had a poor self-esteem, but I couldn't really find what they meant when they said self-esteem. I know that's confusing, but by the end of the video, I'll try to make it clearer. So I went on my healing journey, finally started to experience grief, a lot of stuff from when I was a kid. A lot of that was through relationships, allowed me to, you know, as they're the mirrors, right, of who we are, allowed me to see a lot of things. I started to feel a lot of things. And then I eventually got to this point where I became super depressed and dark. And I got to the edge of suicide. It was full on. And isolated. And I eventually started to cry but I started to experiment more in the thing, and I was able to make it deeper and deeper and deeper by visualizing all these things. And there was a good 2 or 3 sessions of this, 45 minutes to an hour of this very, very immature grief, you could say, because the stuff that was coming up, the words and the thoughts were very, very childish stuff. I don't mean that as a judgment. It's like a quality, like from when I was a kid that hadn't been expressed. And I didn't realize that I'd done it straight away, but then after however long, a week or two, I realized that I didn't have that shame feeling anymore as much. It's obviously, I'm still a work in progress, right? But I remember leading up to that experience, before I grieved all that stuff, I really became super aware of it. And that was the first step, was that I never really was aware of it before, and I was never aware of the depths of it and how it had really affected my life so much. And I just remember when I first did, I was in Poland, I think, and I became aware of this sensation in the heart. And I was alone at the time, a lot of alone time. And it was just this wave coming out of shame. That's the only way I can describe it. This sense of wanting to hide, this sense of feeling bad and broken. And it just became clear. And what also became clear was that it was always there my whole life, no matter what. No matter what I did, no matter where I went, no matter who I was with, no matter what thoughts I tried to think, meditation, whatever it was just this undercurrent type filter that was very, just always there. And once I became aware of it, and I became aware of the fact how it had, in a sense, ruined my life. Although it had been a motivating force, powerful energy, it was also made my life extremely fearful and painful and hiding, and I was unable to express myself properly. And when I became aware of it, I could not get rid of it. It wrecked me for a long time, because no matter what I did, it just could not get my mind off it. Constantly there. And eventually, I can't remember exactly what happened, but eventually the heart started to calm down, and it went away for a while. And then I started to move down into the stomach. And I could eventually, there was a few months there I couldn't feel it anymore, but I was behaving in a kind of shameful way still. So I was like, okay, it's still there, but I can't feel it. It must be somewhere else. And eventually I became aware of it in the stomach. And then it was worse than ever. I felt completely dysfunctional in this period of time. It was a good 3 to 6 months, maybe more, where whatever I would do, I was like this robot who was dead inside. And at the time I was traveling the world, I was very engaged with doing that, and with a lot of things to do with these Latin dance styles that I do in festivals and stuff. But I had a ton of alone time and isolation. But no matter what I did at the time, I was like cardboard, right? Could not get my mind off this shame that was there and that had ruined my life. And then that awareness eventually grew into the grief that I told you about before. And I think that awareness is a very important part of it. Just resting with it for however long it takes. And then the universe gave me the answer, which was this very deep grief. And then after that had happened, like I said, after a couple of weeks, I realized it wasn't there, and it's still not there. It's not 100% gone. I can tell that the behaviors still exist in smaller ways, but it's not this cloud. There was this giant cloud. And what I notice is that I have this fearlessness, I guess. It's hard to describe it like that, because this is part of the whole thing where I don't understand what self-esteem means, because now that the shame is kind of gone, I guess you could consider that I have a higher self-esteem. But it's like, it's just that something isn't there. It's not that I'm suddenly thinking all these positive thoughts about myself and that life, and like I'm not telling myself I never tell myself I love myself. And I don't even really feel that I love myself. It's just that I don't hate myself anymore. I don't think I'm broken. I don't think I'm an awful human being. I don't think all those awful things that I used to think, because the driving factor isn't there anymore. So there's no self-esteem, you could say, because I just have this sense of purpose now. It's not like I think about how good I am or anything. It's just that I kind of get a sense of what I'm here to do, and I'm just doing it. And I'm fearless about it, rather than before I would be so tentative and scared, and I wouldn't do what I wanted to do because of the shame and the fear and stuff. Now I just know what to do and I do it. It's not like I even experience anything that you would call courage or fearlessness or positivity. It's just that there's just this clarity to, I guess the best way to describe it is that what was blocking before is gone or heavily reduced. So now I just do what I do. There's the resistance isn't really there anymore. And it's a difficult thing to describe, but basically the point is that self-esteem advice, it seems like a trick or a lie, right? We're trying to change this thing so we can then one day have good self-esteem. But if you really heal this stuff, and I'm not saying I'm definitely not completely healed or anything. All I've done is I've made a little bit of progress, and I notice a massive difference, but there's still a lot to go, obviously. But there's nothing there that we need to change. There's no thoughts or whatever that we can change into having a self-esteem. We just need to find the things that are causing the whole mess, which are these emotions that we store. And then once we learn how to grieve them or feel them, then self-esteem isn't a thing. It's only a thing when you have low self-esteem. But when you have high self-esteem, self-esteem doesn't exist, if that makes sense. And I think anyone that talks about, if anyone says they have a high self-esteem, for me, I feel like that's the only place that would come from is if they actually have a low self-esteem. Because because the only thing that would cause you to consider that you even have a self-esteem is if it's low, or if it's in some way being generated by the body. So if someone says they have a high self-esteem, what I believe they're saying is that I am overlaying different thoughts or structures to cover up my actual low self-esteem. But if you heal the mess, it just isn't a thing anymore. You just live life and you go and you do what you're here to do, and it's not a problem, and you just sort of forget about it. For whatever reason, I was designed to keep thinking about it, in terms of like, I just like figuring this stuff out, and I like trying to express it clearly to you guys on YouTube and talk about it with good friends that I know. But yeah, I know that was it's a difficult thing to explain, and I know it was a bit of a mess, but I hope maybe that can clarify some stuff for some people. If not, that's okay. If you're trying to fix your self-esteem, I would suggest, like I do always, start to look at what's really causing the low self-esteem. And I'm willing to bet that it's pretty much always emotional for people. If you're not aware of the emotions that that are causing you to have a low self-esteem, then I would suggest to get out there, go out into the world and get relationships and try to do crazy shit, do things that scare the shit out of you, do things that potentially put your life in danger within reason. So that was a big part of it for me, was that I had to do like extreme sports. You might have, rock climbing and mountain biking and just crazy hiking and mountaineering, all that stuff. And this will then make you more aware of your emotions, right? But more than anything, relationships. Go out there and just get into relationships with people. That will show you more than anything who you are, right? Who you really are. And I think that's the best way. If you're not aware of the emotions causing it, then that would be the best way, is just get out of your house and go and engage with life. Create relationships, go and do scary, crazy shit. And then you'll start to feel some emotions, and you start to feel where they are in the body. And then the process begins. Thanks, guys.